Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Let's look at the new lesson. Lesson 23, Active Transport. Active transport moves molecules from a place where there is a low concentration to a place where there is a high concentration. This means that it's moving against the concentration gradient. So molecules naturally want to go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So, to make active transport happen, we actually need to put energy in. And the energy that we need for this comes from the breakdown of food in a process called respiration. The energy is stored in a molecule called ATP, and you might have heard of ATP before. It's literally the energy currency of cells. It's used in lots of different processes that need energy inside cells. But active transport uses ATP as its energy source. So let's look at an example of active transport. If we had a cell with a concentration of salt ions really high inside and a concentration of salt ions really low outside, you'd expect the salt ions to want to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So they'll just naturally diffuse out of the cell. So this is what passive transport would do. But if the cell needed to get more salt ions into it, then it would have to go against this concentration gradient. So it would have to move them from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. And to do that, it needs to use energy, and it's this process that we call active transport. So the salt ions are being transported actively against the concentration gradient. So active transport needs ATP to power it, and it often uses special proteins embedded in cell membranes to help transport molecules. The reason why cells do this is because they might need a certain substance more on one side than the other. For example, if the cells are on the inside of your gut, it's likely that there's going to be more glucose in the gut than inside the cell. But the cell needs glucose, so it is going to use active transport to move the glucose from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Or if the cell has just absorbed glucose, it might want to export that glucose to another part of the body. Again, it will use active transport to move it from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Now here's an example of active transport in root hair cells of plants. Root hair cells absorb mineral ions from the soil water. Typically, the concentration of these ions is greater inside the root hair cell than in the soil water. Therefore, the ions have to be transported against the concentration gradient. This process requires energy, which is supplied by respiration. The energy is used to pump the ions from the soil water into the root hair cells. Here's another example. In the human small intestine, epithelial cells in the villi have many mitochondria, the sites of aerobic respiration. These cells use active transport to take in glucose from the gut even when the concentration of glucose is higher inside the cells. This ensures a continuous supply of glucose for cellular respiration and energy production. So now you know that active transport moves molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration, which is against the concentration gradient. You know that it uses energy from ATP, which comes from the breakdown of food during respiration. And you've seen some examples of where active transport occurs in living organisms. Now let's carry on and learn about how this differs from other types of transport. So there are three main types of molecular transport. There's diffusion, which is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, so down the concentration gradient. It doesn't require any energy, and it usually happens through a partially permeable membrane. Then there's osmosis, which is the movement of water molecules from an area of high water concentration, so a low solute concentration, to an area of low water concentration, so a high solute concentration. It's basically the diffusion of water, and again, it doesn't require any energy. And finally, there's active transport, which we've been focusing on in this lesson. It moves molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration against the concentration gradient, so up the concentration gradient. This requires energy from ATP, which comes from respiration, and it often uses special proteins embedded in cell membranes to help transport molecules. Here's a table summarizing the differences between the three. So along the top, we have diffusion, osmosis, and active transport, and you can see the different features of each. Moving on, here's a question for you to answer. Answer the following question based on the information in the passage. You don't need to write anything yet, just pause the video and think about the answer. This question is, state two ways in which active transport differs from diffusion. Okay, if you're ready, let's reveal the answer. Active transport moves molecules from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration against the concentration gradient, whereas diffusion moves molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration down the concentration gradient. Active transport requires energy from ATP, whereas diffusion does not. Now here's a slightly more challenging question for you to answer. Don't use your notes or the comments section to help you with this one. Pause the video and try to answer the question. This question is explain why active transport is important for cells. Okay, if you're ready, let's reveal the answer. Active transport is important for cells because it enables them to take in substances that they need, even when the substances are in lower concentrations outside the cells. This is important for getting molecules like glucose into cells despite the concentration gradients. Active transport also helps cells remove waste products and harmful substances, maintaining a clean and healthy internal environment. By controlling what enters and exits the cell, active transport helps maintain homeostasis and allows cells to perform essential functions like growth and digestion. If you got that one right, well done, that's a great result. Now let's look at another example of active transport in more detail. In the kidneys, active transport plays a vital role in regulating the concentration of sodium ions in the blood. The nephrons, tiny filtering units in the kidneys, have specialized transport proteins that pump sodium ions back into the bloodstream. This process helps maintain the right balance of sodium ions, which affects blood pressure, fluid levels, and overall electrolyte balance in the body. At the end of the nephron, sodium ions are pumped from the filtrate back into the bloodstream, preventing their loss through urine. By actively transporting sodium ions, the kidneys ensure that the body retains essential ions while efficiently removing waste products. Now let's look at another example. In the roots of plants, active transport is crucial for absorbing essential mineral ions from the soil. The root hairs, tiny extensions of epidermal cells on the roots, contain specialized proteins that pump ions such as nitrates, phosphates, and potassium ions into the root cells. Despite the low concentration of these ions in the soil compared to the root cells, active transport allows the plant to acquire these vital nutrients even when they are scarce in the environment. This process is particularly important for plants growing in nutrient-poor soils or facing competition from other plants for resources. By actively transporting mineral ions, the roots ensure that the plant has access to the necessary nutrients for growth and photosynthesis. So in this lesson, you learned about active transport, how it works, why it's important, and how it differs from other types of molecular transport. And if you want to keep learning about cells and other topics in biology, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.